So I guess we've chose pretty well choosing something indie and small for our film of the week this week because
everything else is cancelled.
Yes.
Even the titan that is Peter Rabbit 2.
How will society cope?
Well, at least there's good side of coronavirus if that's getting postponed. So it's not all bad.
I think it gets a bad rap. I'm firmly in favour of the work it's doing out there. But yes, welcome to Cinema Eclectica. We are the Geek Show's dedicated movie podcast. I'm Graham, and I've been joined this week by
Rob. Hello there.
Later on in the show, we'll be having a review of Magic, the Anthony Hopkins classic from Mick. And Rob thinks about Paul Daniels every time I say that title.
It's just the word magic. It's a very British joke. I know we got international listeners, but it's just... It was like in the 1990s, he was a very, very famous TV comedian, and that's how he said magic.
Yes.
Yes, it's a movie I've been interested in a while, that Magic.
So yeah, you're going to like this show, listeners, but not a lot.
Oi.
So yes, we've got that coming up in the second half of the show for you. But before that, our film of the week, which is Bacurau.
That's the easy to pronounce part.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what Bacurau is. I think they did that song More Than a Woman in the 70s.
Oh, here we go. with all the jokes.
This is I think this premiered at Cannes, if memory serves. It won the jury prize. It's by Kleber Mendonça Filho and Juliano Dornelles. And if any of our Brazilian listeners want me to apologise for those pronunciations, I can do that in person after the show.
It's weird how common it is for Brazilian movies to be co-directed like that.
Is it?
Yeah, because the big profile ones especially.
Yeah, I guess. Because Dornelles, I don't really know. I know he's done like one short that I know of, but Filho had pretty good career going as a solo director. He did Neighbouring Sounds and Aquarius, and now he's teamed up with someone, which you're right is very unusual anywhere else.
But Brazil, it seems to be much more regular. Like City of God is a co-produced effort.
Of course it is.
There's lots of other bits which if I had a photographic memory I could recite, but I don't. Let's be honest.
But this reunites Filho with the star of his last film, Aquarius, Sonia Braga, who I think everyone agreed was unlucky not to get an Oscar nomination for Aquarius, but it was one of those years when Meryl Streep did something.
I've not seen Aquarius, but in Bacurau, is she the female doctor?
She is the doctor,
yes. Yeah. I can see why she would be very acclaimed.
Yeah. So, do you want to do the synopsis, or shall I?
It's a complicated movie.
Yeah.
It starts off with a female lead, and she's heading back home to a town called Bacurau.
Teresa, she is.
A very, very isolated town. It goes on to explain later on in the movie that it's not actually in any modern maps.
Yeah.
I think you have to go back to the 1970s to find out where it is. So for the first, I think it's about 2 hours plus, let's just say, speculatively. But the first hour, it's, here is this community, here are all the people, there's a gang outside of the city which seem to be up to no good. They've holed themselves up in a castle, I believe it was, or something to that, or an old fortress or something like that.
Yeah.
It's all fine, until at one point, about halfway in, you see a drone. I think it's shaped like a spaceship, which gives it an extra ominous sense.
It's a proper 50s style flying saucer.
And then the movie changes tact completely.
Yes.
And I don't know how to describe it. It's a Western, a Brazilian Western. It's got sort of siege mechanics.
Yeah.
And it's all instigated by a group led by, you guessed it, everybody's favourite scuzzball in cinema, Udo Kier.
Yes.
He's sort of like... When the penny drops, that's usually when Udo Kier turns up and things turn from pretty normal and respectable to, oh, hell no, anarchy is afoot. But yeah, it's hard to give it a synopsis because it's not really plot driven. It's just events happen and people respond to them.
Yeah, because I realised that describing it in this way can make it sound like one of those sort of slow burn horrors that everyone's pretty sick of by now.
Yes.
But I enjoyed the amount of time that it took to set up the town of Bacurau. I think it felt less like a sort of time-filling horror movie and more like... I would compare it to the original Wages of Fear, which has a really long, slow build, but when the action starts, you feel invested in the characters.
Yeah, you get like a good sense of who everybody is there. The one person who's outside of that town is the mayor, or somebody who's wanting to be the next mayor.
Yeah, campaigning for it.
He's an idiot. His introduction is he's bringing lots of canned foods and medicine, which is incredibly out of date.
Yes.
So that's the sort of environment they're in. So it requires these people in Bacurau to really look out for each other and get a sense of community. And you know who each people are. The doctor's introduced in a very inflammatory way.
No kidding, yeah.
She's full of blood and thunder.
Yes, because she's introduced at what is sort of the instigating event of the film, I guess, except there isn't really a linear cause and effect to this, but it sets the tone, which is that a 94-year-old woman, the oldest person in Bacurau, has just died. And there is this almost a sense that every bad thing that happens is due to her not being around as the glue that holds the place together.
I never read that from it, but yeah, you do have a point there, yeah.
And there's also a fabulous bit which again becomes relevant later on, where Teresa, who's played by a Brazilian actress called Barbara Collin, who I don't know but is brilliant in this, drops an unspecified hallucinogen at her funeral and just sees water bubbling out of her coffin. Which
it's like it's in any other director's hands, it'd be quite social realist, but it isn't. But it is.
And for a while it does feel like that. It's a community portrait. There's very little music in the first half apart from the music the characters play. There's certainly nothing that tips you off to the fact that this is going to have the most astonishing head explosion since the early days of David Cronenberg.
It's quite a turn in the tale, really, but I think that the first half is what makes it work, because it was just 2 hours of siege mentality Western. It'd be fine, it'd be good. The characters in that world would work, but I think getting to know them in sort of peacetime is what makes it work so much better in, I guess, just wartime, I guess, for them.
Yeah. Because that is the thing. I don't want to say it's so much more than a genre exercise, because I think, neither of us think that there's anything to be ashamed about in making a good genre exercise, right?
Oh, no, of course not.
But what I think that slow build-up does is it forces you to take this seriously as something that is happening outside of a sort of inverted commas movie world. You get the sense of Bacurau, not just its people, but what it is as a village, that it has a whole society that works and depends on each other. And it feels more catastrophic when Udo Kier turns up.
It happened when the proverbial hits the fan before Udo Kier turns up.
Yes.
You do get to know the characters very well, but there's this scene where 2 cyclists turn up, and the attitude of the people in the town, it gets much more defensive, I think.
Yeah.
And the way that the movie's constructed as well, you think you get used to the players, you get used to the characters, and it feels like an intrusion when these people who wear, I think it's like bright orange and pink,
they've got
cycling
ghastly
suits.
kind of 90s Dayglow crap all over them.
Yeah, credited as foreigners, apparently. But it's such a weird twist in the tone, really. And then it becomes something entirely different, and they play off each other well. I don't think one can function without the other.
Yeah.
But they both elevate each other at the same time.
And when it does go south for the inhabitants of Bacurau, I mean, without wanting to spoil anything, but I just want it to be absolutely clear that when this becomes a genre movie, it works. It's so tense and so thrilling.
Because it pulls together all of the pieces. As I mentioned earlier, there was like a group who are out of the town who live in a fortress. And they're part of the community, but it's kind of like, if you're a Catholic, you can never not be a Catholic. You're just a bad Catholic.
Yeah.
And then it's they're Bacurau. I'm trying to say a word which probably doesn't exist, but I'm going to try anyway. Bacurauians. But they're just bad Bacurauians.
Yeah, because the villains, I guess, in this are kind of interesting. They're not all drawn from the same background. You mentioned that some of them are foreigners. One of them's Udo Kier, and you can't make Udo Kier be anything other than a very intimidating German. It's just... Yeah, he is.
Brilliant scene. I mean, the Udo Kier will always be... His reputation, I think he's made peace with his reputation. I mean, bless him.
I think he revels in it.
He has to. But his reputation is he's in skeevy movies.
Yeah.
But there's a scene in this, I think it's where an American who's a bit aggrieved accuses Udo Kier of being a Nazi.
Yes, that was my favourite bit too.
And the reaction, not only is everything he says spot on, but the performance.
Yeah.
Oh, it's good.
I also like the fact that this is a guy who is absolutely evil but gets deeply affronted when someone calls him a Nazi. It's sort of like, I expect to see him in The Spectator next week writing about how unfair it is that the intolerant left are villainising him just because he's a multiple murderer.
It's that character which also positions the movie in a very interesting sort of moral place. Because it's not like the Bacurauians are good, the people visiting are evil. That speech makes it a massive a case of varying degrees of grey.
There's an uneasy coalition between Kiev and his cohorts in this, because some of them are Brazilian themselves, and there's an observation of kind of social difference that Bacurau is a working-class village whose inhabitants are mostly black, and the outsiders tend to be sort of light-skinned from outside the region, more of wealthy Brazilian background, which I think is kind of key to what Philo and Dornells are trying to get at here, that for them, although Bacurau is a very larger-than-life film, this isn't really a game. This is commentary on what they feel is actually happening to their country.
I mean, there's not many ways to read the subtext. Mine was, I don't know if you recall it, but when that buffoon of an American dentist went abroad and paused with a lion he shot.
Yeah.
The way I read that movie is, what if the lion was just as well armed as the hunters? And it sort of... played out that scenario.
It's interesting to look at this in terms of Philo's career, and I do, you have to acknowledge Giuliano Dornells, and it's possible that part of the reason why this feels different from Philo's earlier film is because of his influence. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as I say, I haven't seen any of Dornells' previous work. So in Philo's case, he did a movie at the start of his career called Neighbouring Sounds.
It got his name out in the world, that one, yeah.
Neighbouring Sounds is kind of like a version of Bacurau where Udo Kier never turns up, I guess.
Okay.
It's just this very slow, simmering kind of suburban tension film where people stop relating to each other, but it never hits the crisis point that this film does.
Yeah. Going to the second half of the movie, though, I think it's positioned really, really well. It could just be... I mean, I imagine being a fan of westerns and spaghettis, you could drop all sorts of references about how like a town just descends into chaos and everybody's shooting everybody. But it's not positioned that way. It's not like a massive release of a shootout. Once all the cards are being set and the situation is inescapable, the first thing that happens is the doctor talks to Udo Kier.
Yeah.
Nothing action-packed or violent there. It's just them talking.
Them talking and listening to True by Spandau Ballet, which cracks me up for some reason.
It's an odd positioning of music. But from that, I mean, nothing really happens for a while. It's just the invaders, let's just call them, walking around the town. Nothing happens.
Yeah.
And everything that happens is so very, very well orchestrated, but it has, like you said, that simmering tension.
Yeah.
Like something is going to pop off, so to speak, but it's not going to give you it in that sort of a cathartic release. It's just sort of simmering. Something's going to happen somewhere.
And it's hard to tell for me whether Phil Ho has, whether this is a natural outgrowth from his earlier films. It certainly feels like it could be a sort of spiritual sequel to Aquarius, which has the same idea of the elder figure sort of holding the village together.
Yeah.
Or whether he's actually just put a bomb under his universe and just made it absolutely chaotic.
It's weird at post-chaos as well, how nonchalant it is. And there's a scene there's a museum there, the Bacurau Museum, and just nonchalantly mopping away the rivers of blood, like it's just a normal Tuesday.
Yes.
I don't know if you'd call that sort of a black sense of humour, but that's the way I was reading it anyway.
I think there is definitely a vein of dark humour in it. There is
with the Spandau Ballet as well, yeah. Spandau Ballet, that's a word to come out with.
Bacurau, by the way, is Portuguese for nightjar, the type of bird which the ancient Greeks thought was capable of guiding souls into the underworld.
Well, that's pretty good, that.
Because it is a sort of liminal place. Like you say, it's been literally scrubbed off the map.
Yeah. Does it mention that? I can't remember why it's not on the map.
I don't think it explicitly says it, but I think given what happens in the second half, you can understand why people would want it to be isolated.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, there's many Bacurau's, isn't there? That's the one of the subtexts that it drops on you.
Yes, it has a very paranoid closing line to that effect.
But yes, I was a big fan of this because when I heard of, you hear this a lot, it says, oh, it's a new Brazilian movie, or it's a new Iranian movie, or it's a new French, or added nation is applicable.
There's an element where you think, what does that even mean?
Like a hot festival movie, which is a world thing. Like even with Parasite a few weeks ago, oh, it's this new hot Korean movie.
Yeah.
It's like, you say it so much, yes. I don't know anymore. But when a Bacurau or a Parasite comes through and it's genuinely a fantastic watch.
Yeah.
It's got so much to say and it does it in an incredibly unique way.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be impressed by this sort of endeavour, I think.
I honestly want to impress upon listeners that if there is anyone in our listenership who had their first foreign film experience with Parasite, and I know statistically that there have been people who've done that.
I imagine so, yeah.
Please press on to this because it's just the perfect chase of it's so brash, so daring, so entertaining. I mean, I came out of it just wishing that there were British movies like this.
Yeah. Also, if the last revelatory Brazilian movie was City of God. So if you watched that and thought, this is great, I'd like to see more Brazilian movies, I think Bacurau is almost ready-made for you to sort of get something out of it.
Yeah, that was the City of God, I think, was the last big crossover point. I must put a word in for Philo's previous films, though, because I think Neighbouring Sounds in particular is terrific. But even then, I would never have guessed he'd go here.
It's such a left turn. It's, how can I put it in a bit more of a mainstream way?
It is sort of like, if Mike Leigh had suddenly turned around and directed Straw Dogs.
Yes. Well, maybe one day. Maybe one day he'll discover a pulse of filmmaking.
So do we have any recommendations to go with this?
It's very hard. I don't know really. Have you got anything that jumps off the
I kept thinking about a film that I watched a year or two ago on Mubi, where they were doing a series dedicated to a Filipino director called Cavan or Caven or
anybody's guess.
Yeah. I'll say Caven because Cavan just makes him sound like a club. But he did a film called Alipato, The Very Brief Life of an Ember, which was this weirdly
Oh, yes.
kind of over-the-top film about child gangsters, which I suppose again takes us back to City of God. I wasn't thinking about that. I thought it had that kind of brash genre-crossing energy.
Yeah.
That sometimes when you see a foreign language movie and it's different to Western movies, you think, they have different cinematic traditions in that country. And sometimes when you see a foreign language movie that's different to Western movies, you think, it's because the director is genuinely mad. And that's where Karen comes in.
Okay, sounds compelling. I'm going to be a bit sort of mainstream. Mine is the movie which killed Alex Cox's career, Walker.
Yes, good call.
Which, how do you describe Walker? It's set in Nicaragua, is it?
Nicaragua, yeah.
Where Walker, I can't remember who's played the character.
Ed Harris.
Yeah, Ed Harris is charged by somebody who effectively owns the land of Nicaragua to go over there and be overseer, basically.
Yeah.
So it starts off as a Western sort of war movie, very violent, and then it evolves in the second half to become sort of about his absolute insanity and political downfall.
Yeah.
It's not about his problems, but it's incredibly political, and it's no wonder it killed his career because he was swinging for the fences in this thing. And between the two, I think it's kind of like the high energy and low energy version of a similar sort of tale.
I get that, yeah.
So I think it'd be compelling. That Walker from Alex Cox.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wish I'd thought of that because it's bang on. So if you're enjoying what you're listening to and you want to help us keep making more of these podcasts, you can donate to our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Geek Show. We're on Facebook, just search for The Geek Show, and on Twitter at TGS_The Geek Show. And don't forget, if you follow us on social media, you can see all our new YouTube videos, as well as Impossible Mission, our new video game series.
This is Hunt Emerson on The Geek Show. I'm a cartoonist. I draw comics, and I'm having a great time here in Sunderland. And I'm happy to be talking to you here on The Geek Show.
Unsure if your Spider-Man is amazing or spectacular? Infinitely confused by Crisis on Infinite Earths? Or does the mere thought of X-Men continuity make you tremble? Then 4Panel is the podcast for you. Join me, Andrew, and my co-host Robin Mick as we guide you through the weird and wild world of comics. We'll talk about the secret origins of your favourite characters, delve into the craziest events of comics past, and review the hottest new graphic novels that you might have missed. That's 4Panel, a part of the Geek Show Podcast Network, available wherever podcasts are found.
So, question of the week. We thought in a minute Rob will be reviewing Bernard Rose's Samurai Marathon.
Yes, interesting movie from an interesting source.
A film which I was personally astonished to realise is about exactly what it sounds like it's about.
The origin of the Japan Marathon.
Yeah,
which
samurai.
It's not what the movie you'd think it'd be, you know. It's very interesting.
Samurai Marathon, what's that a metaphor for? It's a metaphor for samurai doing a marathon. So we asked, not what the best is, we asked what is the most underrated sports movie? And Andrew Young from our sister shows Literary Loitering and 4Panel says Shaolin Soccer, proving that every sports movie needs more kung fu.
Is that underrated though? I mean, it's amazing, but I think it's rightly rated.
Maybe, yeah. I feel like there was a point where it seemed like Stephen Chow was going to cross over big style and then it didn't quite go, maybe.
Yeah. So maybe it is underrated now.
Maybe it is.
Maybe I'm in the vacuum of 2008 or whatever it was, where it was like the biggest thing in the world.
Yes.
That and Kung Fu Hustle. And then he just vanished, didn't he?
Yeah.
Back into his homeland, not into obscurity.
Yeah, back into the biggest film market into the world. Where is he now?
Yeah. Small fry.
Producer Rob says, my pick for underrated sports movies, American Flyers, which he told us before we started came from a time in the 80s where people were interested in cycling. I refuse to believe such a thing has ever happened.
That's sci-fi talk, clearly.
Murderball, which I think is a good call. That's about a documentary about wheelchair rugby.
They've changed the name of it since, haven't they?
It's the most violent sport in the world. It's amazing. It's no wonder so many of them have missing limbs.
Wow, really?
Well, yeah, they're in wheelchairs.
Oh, well, yeah, but there's other reasons for wheelchairs.
Yes, yeah. Mystery Alaska, Mr. Baseball, Tomorrow's Joe, all solid suggestions. We also got some answers in on Facebook. I'm pleased to say that Bill Hilton's joke answer is good. I mean, it's good every week, but it's just...
Baiting other weeks.
Yes, this week he says, can't decide between the crying game and Play Misty for me.
That's a golf of movies, eh?
Possibly the latter, because the rules of Misty are very complicated, and Clint does a good job of explaining them in that scene in the dressing room with the blackboard. Sad that it was cut from the general release version.
Okay.
Oliver Lewis says, and I think this cuts to the heart of the problem, bit difficult as most sports movies are terrible.
That's not fair.
It's not fair, but it's right.
Yes.
So they tend to get rated as soon as they're even at all competent. But anyway, I will go for Early Man, which may not be Aardman's greatest work, but I thought was still very charming and with an all-time great sight gag involving a duck.
It's a football movie, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think 99.99% of all football movies are awful.
Oh, God, yeah.
Especially that one with Neil Morrissey. Every Sunday Comes or something. That's the one that always sticks in my memory whenever I think of football movies.
Yes, yeah.
International acting sensation, Neil Morrissey.
British screen icon.
I've been corrected. British screen icon.
That was
Neil Morrissey.
literally how he was described in a press release we got for something, listeners. Ian Payne says Breaking Away, a cycling movie from 1979. Oliver Lewis also adds, I also feel I ought to watch Foxcatcher again at some point, which I guess leads me into my answers, kind of, because Foxcatcher we did way back.
I think that was actually episode
2.
Yeah.
Episode 2, I
Wow.
checked this. Yeah.
That's going back.
And on that show, we also had a segment about what our favourite sports movies were. So obviously I went obscure because, what else was there to do on a dull Tuesday afternoon? And one of the movies I picked, I think, has picked up a cult following now. Whip It, Drew Barrymore's.
Yes, that has really found its audience.
And rightly so. I think it's fantastic. But the other one I mentioned, I think, still deserves more light shone on it. It's The Great Ecstasy of Woodcarver Steiner, Werner Herzog's documentary about the ski jumper.
Of course, it has to be Werner Herzog.
I think when you want a movie exploring why people are mad enough to risk their lives doing something that is objectively pointless, what other director are you going to call?
That's a fair, valid point, yes.
Yeah. And it's great, Woodcarver Steiner. It has these amazing films of ski jumps filmed in ultra slow motion that cut off before the end, so it just looks like people are hovering ecstatically above the mountains.
That's nice.
It's fantastic. It's very Herzog.
I feel I'm going to have to sort of stick on brand for myself. The one which I'll always have a soft spot for, I don't know how well rated it is, but it'll always be in there, rattling around in my heart. But Mighty Ducks.
Oh, yeah.
Because, come on, it's Mighty Ducks. Not the sequels, though. Never the sequels. And being the cheat that I am, some martial arts movies are sports movies.
Yes.
But not like the general 10 a penny one. It has to have a fighting competition in it. So I'm going to go with Master of the Flying Guillotine.
Okay.
The Flying Guillotine, it's one of those movies which will never see release because it basically illegally used a lot of, how is it pronounced, Neu? The German choreograph band.
Oh, right, okay.
It's absolutely amazingly badass and it makes it feel like such a unique spectacle, but super illegal. But is there a competition to find the best martial artist as a big part of it? And here is a fact, fans. It's got somebody who practices the same sort of martial arts that Dalsim from Street Fighter does. So he's got big, long, stretchy arms. And with it being 1970s, low budget Taiwanese kung fu movie, it doesn't look great, right. But it leaves an impact, and it's definitely underrated. Probably for legal reasons, though. Let's be fair. Right, so Samurai Marathon. I've seen it's on Amazon Prime through Signature Entertainment, who also put out First Love.
Right, yeah.
Which is on the website. I remember you mentioned on a recent show, and it's fab because it's Takashi Miike somehow, after 103 movies, still not wanting to just end it all. It's an amazing gift he's got. But this one, it's also a Japanese movie. And it's from Bernard Rose.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
The director of Candyman has somehow found himself in Japan making a feudal Japanese movie.
Yeah. And he's done a lot of interesting stuff, hasn't he, Bernard Rose? Paper House, his debut is very good.
Yeah, he's an odd duck, really, and I like those sort of directors who can't really be penned into that specific hall
Completely.
to do that specific type of film. He's just kind of a free man.
Yeah.
In this, there's a feudal... Well, you get into lots of feudal politics, and it's why so many kung fu movies are almost impossible to, well, understand, really, without like a history degree in classics and whatnot. But in this, there's a feudal lord who's having problems with the emperor. The emperor's got spies all over the place, and there's also Americans are coming there trying to offer guns. So the feudal lord's a bit antsy.
Yeah.
And because it's like the dying embers of the samurai age, he thinks, you know what, I'm going to really challenge my samurai, my men in the barracks. And so he does that, right? He says, right, you've got to run 36 miles, which, that's not a marathon, that's longer than a marathon. So they have to like run from the place, to check into zones where they've got to put a card, the guy lets them pass, the staff let them pass, they go to the next place. And about halfway in the marathon, it's literally a marathon, these are really out of shape samurai. So there's lots of, it's like when you did it cross country at school, there's always the kids at the back who are walking all the time.
And that's me. And
yeah.
everyone else in the room, judging by that response.
But I don't think in the case of cross country there was like people vomiting.
Well, again.
Oh, well, yes, they are putting the hands up, so yes, there was. But all of the sort of the players start coming in. There's a spy who is one of the focal points of the movie. He keeps on sending letters to Kyoto, which is the capital of Japan at that time, about things that are happening, whether there's like suspicious actions. And not knowing that the feudal lord is going to send them on a marathon, he thinks, hang on, this feudal lord's going to try and rebel against the emperor.
Yeah.
So he sends a note out. Realising that it's just a marathon, he thinks, oh, blimey, car geezer, I better sort this out. And it's too late, because as the marathon is happening, there's men of the feudal lord the emperor, turn up and start stabbing people up.
Yikes.
It all makes sense as a narrative. It's quite remarkable how they have so many moving parts and there's so much history, and it's still quite elegant and still quite simple and all the plot beats are resolved. It doesn't overextend itself. But it's interesting in the sense of, as far as samurai movies, as much as I love them, they're very similar.
Yeah.
And apart from Gohato or Taboo, I think it was called, they're not really interested in the ensemble.
Gohato is a great movie, by the way, if anyone hasn't seen it.
Yeah, it's about a gay relationship blossoming in a samurai barracks.
And it was the last film by Nagima Oshima, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Check that out if you can. But it's very much ensemble based. There's a lot of familiar faces, but the big face is kind of like a rising star in Japanese cinema right now. Is Shota Somatani, who's done a lot of work with Seion Sono. He was in First Love as possibly the most insane and a character. This is a claim to fame, right? The most nonchalant murder scene in any Takashi Miike movie. That's not something.
There's competition for that, right?
Yeah. It's not like best try it in a class of 5 in a small rural school. It's a big field that he's playing with. And this, he's kind of like, he's the fastest runner, but he's told to sort of, play it down so somebody else can win, because Godfather style, the person who wins gets a wish granted.
Okay.
Like I said, lots of moving parts.
Yeah.
And And yeah, it kind of goes about a nice old clip. It's very entertaining. It's quite funny. But the weirdest part of all is it's a true story.
Right.
This actually happened.
Oh.
This is actually the story which inspired the Japan marathon.
Ah.
So I don't think the Great North Marathon, the Great North Run has the same sort of history to it. Or the London Marathon or the New York Marathon.
I mean, you are at risk of getting stabbed, but other than that.
Yeah, I mean, the New York Marathon was like, do you want to start a run? Yeah, let's do a run. Okay, then let's run.
Mick has his hand up. Yeah, that's why you run.
Yeah, that's why you run from Newcastle, yeah. But it's interesting, that sort of stranger than fiction, truth is stranger than fiction story.
Yeah.
Where, yeah, you wouldn't think that the inspiration behind the Japan Marathon was some dopey spy cocked up and ended up getting loads of people murdered and there's princesses involved and... Oh, it's really well choreographed as well. I mean, it doesn't feel like a movie by, if I can get in the right term here, Gaijin, foreigner.
Oh, right, yeah.
It feels like a movie by a Japanese director.
Mm.
And as far as saying something is good within those parameters, that is about as much as you can achieve. That's about as high as a compliment as you can achieve.
Yeah.
Because there's so many directors who go to Japan. I think there was one on Netflix starring Jared Leto.
Oh boy, yeah. People did not like
Outlander,
that.
The Outsider?
The Outsider, which was going to be Takashi Miike's first English language film.
He would have done a lot better with it, I think. But yeah, it's a great credit to it that it feels like a Japanese movie by a Japanese talent, and it's all very, very Japanese. But it's not. It's by Bernard Rose, who's done a marvellous job, I think, with it.
Mm.
So it's very interesting. That's on Amazon Prime, and I would recommend fans of Japanese cinema and just weird true stories to check it out.
I'm glad Bernard Rose is doing well, because he feels like one of those directors who has a good body of work and it's thematically kind of interesting and consistent, but he just never gets attention as a big name auteur for some reason.
And Richard Stanley as well. He's constantly overlooked, and getting this little chance to shine again is nice. Really nice. Samurai Marathon, yeah.
Although No Time to Die has been pushed back to November this year, we're continuing with our look at the previous actors to play James Bond. We're up to 1973 at this point in our retrospective. Britain enters the European Economic Community, as it was known at that time. Last of the Summer Wine begins on BBC One, and Roger Moore is Ian Fleming's James Bond 007.
My name is Bond. James Bond.
He was originally signed up for a 3-picture deal at the tender age of 46, and his tenure is characterised by the franchise's struggle in the 1970s and early 1980s between the influences of the new American blockbuster cinema and its own roots in Fleming's texts. The inconsistency of this era of the franchise may be why Roger Moore is seen as quite an unserious Bond, even though he certainly has his moments. But as a result of that tension, all 7 of his films wind up landing in different genres. So let's take a look at each of them in turn, starting strangely enough with the supernatural blaxploitation thriller one.
There seems to be some mistake. My name is...
James is for tombstones, baby. You all take this honky out and waste him, now!
Live and Let Die sees Moore's new Bond run up against Yaphet Kotto's Caribbean dictator turned Harlem drug lord, while also tangling with unexplainable voodoo, man-eating alligators, and a fearsome witch doctor. Tonally, this is an altogether weirder instalment than anything else the franchise has produced before or since. It's one of the few times in Moore's era where we see Bond out of his element and out of his depth, which is a surefire way to make the character more relatable. However, in this case, it has the effect of setting up Moore as utterly unflappable. If he didn't even blink at fighting a voodoo wizard or nearly being fed to alligators, why would he raise more than an eyebrow at the prospect of going into space 3 films later? Anyway, the following year we got Enter the Dragon ripoff in the shape of The Man with the Golden Gun, which stars Christopher Lee as the villain. In real life, Christopher Lee was Ian Fleming's cousin, and his pre-movie star life as a member of the intelligence services served as the partial inspiration for the exploits of James Bond. And yet, in the film where Christopher Lee stars as Scaramanga, the world's greatest assassin, Roger Moore is taking the character of James Bond in an entirely different direction. Farther from the roots of army intelligence, this is all about killing tournaments, secret islands, and martial arts academies, with very little jeopardy for Bond, even compared to the previous film in the series. The third type of genre that the Moore era gets into is the romantic comedy. The Spy Who Loved Me centres around Bond's opposite number in the KGB, Barbara Bach's Agent XXX. Never to be confused with Vin Diesel, XXX is reluctantly paired with Bond in the spirit of Anglo-Soviet entente, while also searching for the man who murdered her lover. But there's just one problem.
Did you kill him?
The answer to the question is yes. I did kill him.
Then, when this mission is over, I will kill you.
See what I mean? Romantic comedy. But, for a number of reasons, The Spy Who Loved Me is the peak of Moore's run, with a story that complements his lighter approach to the part by incorporating a classic villain plot and a new iconic henchman in the shape of Richard Keel's Jaws, again named for another popular blockbuster. On top of everything else, the film is iconic from its famous opening sequence onwards.
And he goes over a cliff and he's falling, and you think, oh, God, James Bond's going to die! He's going to die! But then, at the last minute...
He pulls a ripcord, right? And a parachute comes out, and it's got a Union Jack on it.
Michael!
Next up, regrettably, it's a space opera. Now, according to the traditional James Bond will return teaser at the end of The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only was supposed to be Moore's fourth film, but the arrival of George Lucas's Star Wars prompted producers to dust off a sci-fi sounding Fleming title and join the Hollywood space race. Purporting to be filmed, quote, on location in outer space in its end credits, Moonraker spends less time in orbit than you'd expect, but its chase sequences include every possible earthbound vessel, bar the kitchen sink, before blasting off into insanity. When For Your Eyes Only did finally arrive, it took a far more grounded tack in the form of a revenge movie. Longtime series editor John Glenn took over directing duties for this one. It's a story in which Bond encounters an orphaned heiress while hunting down a terrorist who's holding a decoder machine for ransom. It has some of the daft trappings of this particular era, acknowledging the UK's first female Prime Minister with a downright stupid ending, where Margaret Thatcher can't tell the difference between a parrot and a person, but with its Cold War sabre rattling, it's still more of a throwback to the From Russia With Love era than anything else we saw during this time. The next film, Octopussy, is an interesting case because it was intended to freshen up the series by bringing in a new Bond after 5 films of Roger Moore. James Brolin and someone called Timothy Dalton were among those considered to take over, but Eon decided to persuade Moore back for what would turn out to be a battle of the Bonds. Sean Connery had signed with producer Kevin McClory, who held the screen rights to Thunderball in a unique bit of litigious nonsense, for an independent James Bond movie titled Never Say Never Again. It was released in direct competition with the next Eon production, which was of course Octopussy. All of this is to get around to the 6th genre that Moore's tenure covers, which is basically, well, a travelogue. There's little else to say there. The Bond movies have always had this quality, but Octopussy is like this berserk episode of Wish You Were Here, which takes in tours of India and West Germany on the road to an exciting climax where small children laugh at James Bond. But then 53-year-old Connery made his worst movie all over again, so the real loser that year was audiences. Finally, Moore's 7th genre hop came with 1985's A View to a Kill, a film that's primarily, for better or worse, an out-and-out Bond movie. Hooray! Now 57 years old and romancing love interest young enough to be his daughter, the star finally drew a line under the series after granting the enjoyably absurd sights of him trying to seduce a very dominant Grace Jones and otherwise lovably gadding around with Avengers star Patrick Macnee like 2 old gents who have somehow mistaken themselves for secret agents. Although Roger Moore has earned some flack for his performance over time, he shows pretty faultless command of the part over the course of his 12 years in the role. If for nothing else than the sheer range of genres he dropped into, his is a deceptively versatile Bond, applying his consummate eyebrow control as the bellwether of the romping tonal shift of his tenure.
Swan, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
When it comes to purely entertaining escapades, nobody does it better. That said, on next week's episode, we'll explore how Timothy Dalton does it better.
Yeah, so this is Magic from 1978, and although I said magic, it's not, ironically, a biopic of Paul Daniels.
How dare you beat me to that joke?
Because I saw it putting its shoes on. However, this is a film that you may like, and you may not like. It tells the story of Corky, not the cat from The Dandy, but a magician, played by Hopkins, who's been the apprentice to an older magician who is now sadly heading for that great stage in the sky. Corky's sort of looking after the old guy, who now lives his stage act vicariously through the recounting of how Corky's attempts at stage magic have gone. And he's playing seedy nightclubs to disinterested socialites. And it's really well shot by Richard Attenborough in that you get the narration Corky gives to his mentor at the same time as you see the exact opposite of what he's describing being played out. So he'll be saying, "Oh yeah, I did the card, I did the Rising Aces, perfect. It just went exactly to plan. The crowd went wild as we see them laughing at each other, ordering drinks, ignoring him completely, him breaking into a flop sweat." So that's really nice. And so from that, and then sadly the mentor dies, and so it would appear is Corky's career.
Right.
But he's got an agent.
Yeah.
Played brilliantly by Burgess Meredith.
Oh, I love Burgess Meredith.
And he's your sort of archetypal Hollywood agent. He knows everyone. He can get you a seat anywhere, at any table, in any restaurant. He's that kind of a guy. And we see a few months later that he's given Corky some advice to get something into the act.
Yeah.
Because Corky's quite awkward. He's quite socially awkward. He's quite introverted for someone who's chosen a career that involves being on stage in front of people. And he finds it. He finds his shtick in the shape of a ventriloquist doll called Fats. Fats.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, there's no explanation as to why he's called Fats. He's just called Fats.
Okay.
And what Fats does is it does that thing of being the voice of what Corky wants to say.
Yeah.
And so Fats gets the laughs and becomes the distraction, which in turn is how Burgess Meredith expects to get Corky the big break on TV.
Yeah.
Because it's explained that magic doesn't work on TV. Because when you're on stage doing magic, you're distracting the audience's eye, but you can't distract a camera.
Yeah.
The doll, of course, gives him the way to distract the camera, in much the same way as Paul Daniels used Debbie McGee.
Never describe it as how he used Debbie McGee again.
So, the introduction of Fats puts Corky on the rise. You know, he's selling bigger and bigger venues. His agent's managing to get him interviews with TV companies. There's talk of an NBC special, and it all starts to get to be a bit much for Corky. He's starting to feel the pressure of success.
Yeah.
And he wants to get away from it all. So he goes back to his small town that he originally came from, and goes to hire a little log cabin down by the lake in the rundown town that he comes from. And it's run by Peggy, who's played by Anne Margaret. And she was like the prom queen, and Corky was hopelessly smitten with her, but never plucked up the courage to ask her out. She's now married to a man whose occupation is not really defined. It kind of seems to be a bit real estatey, but he also goes off into the mountains hunting.
Right.
It's an odd combination, hunter, estate agent, possibly realtor kind of gig.
Jack London did not write novels about those kind of guys.
No. But of course, by this point, it's quite a literal exploration of schizophrenia in that there's a split personality and the doll is definitely becoming more dominant as the personality.
Right.
And anything that starts to get in Corky's way, whether it's in terms of his romance with Peggy, which starts to grow, or Peggy's husband, or indeed the agent who comes and hunts him down looking for him to give him more advice.
Yeah.
Things don't go well. But of course, Peggy's in danger, not because she's standing in Corky's way,
right,
but she's taking Corky's attention away from Fats.
Ah.
And it's here that there's a couple of parallels with last year's Joker movie.
Right.
So first of all, you've got the entertainer who's descending into madness.
Yeah.
There's also a quite creepy similarity between Fats and Joaquin Phoenix's character.
Right.
It's like a proto-Joker.
Okay.
It's ably directed by Richard Attenborough.
Mm-hmm.
It's 100 minutes long, which is nout, really, for that kind of a psychological drama. I think you can see where it's inspired the likes of Chucky and Annabelle and those kind of things, where they've taken it far more down the horror route.
Yeah.
This isn't a horror. This is a psychological thriller. It's not overly gruesome. A lot of what goes on is imagined. You're led down a certain route, but it's left very much to your imagination as to what's occurred.
Yeah.
There's no happy ending.
Right.
Spoiler alert. It's a good film. It's not one of Attenborough's best. It's certainly not one of Hopkins' best. And Anne Margaret is underutilised, I would say.
Right.
She's more scenery than character. But, it's the 70s. There was that element of it. It's a surprisingly small cast as well.
Yeah.
For a major Hollywood movie. But it's an enjoyable one. I wouldn't say it's an enjoyable one in the same way that, I don't know, Ice Age is, but...
that was not the name I expected you to pull out the bag.
But, it's not a fun movie.
Yeah.
But it's a movie that you can enjoy as a movie.
Yeah.
It's one of those that's constantly going to get argued about whether it's a horror movie or not. I don't think it is. I think it's more of a portrait of a deranged mind that suddenly gets a release.
Yeah.
But it's very enjoyable. And it's out on Blu-ray on the 23rd of March from Second Sight Films.
Quite an odd directorial project for Attenborough, really, isn't it?
It is a bit of a departure.
When you look down his directorial CV, and it's like Young Winston, Gandhi, Shadowlands...
Murderous Puppet Doll.
Yeah, the one about a mad puppet. I mean, don't get me wrong, Shadowlands would be infinitely improved if C.S. Lewis had a murderous puppet doll.
Actually, we should do that as a project. Richard Attenborough films that would have been different had a murderous puppet doll been involved. Gandhi. Miracle on 34th Street. Santa with his murderous doll. He could have a murderous Krampus doll.
Yes. Of course, if you put it in Jurassic Park, it would just turn into Westworld.
That's true.
Yeah. Michael Crichton, man of 1,000 stories, most of which were about theme parks.
Yes.
The other ones with competitions, but it's got Dalsim in it. How could I not pick Dalsim?
Oh, listeners, we've had a fun time in between there, just going through all the very great sports movies that we forgot in Question of the Week. The Damned United, we missed out.
Oh, we have to use every single opportunity that's afforded to us to recommend people watch Diamantino, because it is Diamantino. It is nuts.
Yeah. And if we're talking underrated, I mean, that movie really needs more love.
I'm surprised it never got more of a fan base.
Yeah,
it's so...
It's
whatever
hilarious.
That is.
Yeah.
Big pink fluffy dogs. How could you not love that?
Big pink fluffy dogs and a character who is very obviously based on Cristiano Ronaldo at the centre of a sort of Brexit cloning conspiracy.
It's the movie for our day.
Yes. Anyway, I say out next week. Out next week at the time of recording.
Who knows what could happen in the interim?
Listeners, if all of these films are just replaced with a film strip of Boris Johnson going, "Oh, blimey, blinking, your grandma's going to cark it," do not blame us. But
it's funny because it's true.
Supposedly out next week, Astronaut, a small British film starring the not very small, not very British actor Richard Dreyfuss.
Not heard of that, but...
There is, and this is the kind of sentence that you just live to read out.
Okay.
There is a purportedly heartwarming Finnish BDSM comedy called Dogs Don't Wear Pants.
Oh, it's got the coolest poster.
It does, doesn't it?
It has the coolest poster. It's basically a dog and a stiletto sort of body horrored together, and it's amazing.
Well done for using body horror as a verb there.
The poster, usually posters like, it's a poster, I don't care. It's
a few floating heads, that sort of thing.
But that one, that is what I want to watch that movie just because of that poster. It is a doozy.
We've got Fire Will Come, the latest from the typically inscrutable Oliver Lax. This one is actually about arsonists, so, there is...
It's accurately named, at least.
There's a connection between the title and the film, which there isn't always with Lax. There's Radioactive, Marjan Satrapi, the director of Persepolis, tackling the life of Marie Curie, starring Rosamund Pike.
Odd duck filmography-wise.
She is naff.
What, Persepolis, The Voices, something else she did as well, I can't quite remember.
I think she directed one of her other comic books that she did, but really strange career.
It's not like when you think of auteur theory, you think, you know what a movie by this person's going to be like, but with her it's like, no, whatever I feel like. Which is kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
She's an interesting voice in the world.
There's The Great Buster, a documentary about Buster Keaton. And we have that Buster Keaton set coming up, don't we?
Yes, Volume 2 of the Eureka set. It's not quite as high-hitting as the first one, which had Sherlock Jr., The General, and something else. I can't remember.
Is it Steamboat Bill?
Might have been, yeah, but three of his super big hitters there.
Yeah.
So these fall a little bit lower on that scale, but still, Buster Keaton is just one of the greatest cinematic joys as far as I'm concerned, so there's never a bad thing when it comes to him.
We've got one of those films which is made purely to make people go, really? Which is The Jesus Rolls, John Turturro's Big Lebowski spin-off.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's the right reaction you set that up with.
Absolutely bonkers cast in this as well. Aside from Turturro, there's Audrey Tautou, Susan Sarandon, Pete Davidson off Saturday Night Live, John Hamm and Christopher Walken. That's
a great cast. It's also really endearing to know that character still connects with people.
It's quite weird, isn't it? Because he's in the film for about 3 minutes and he's not a good guy.
No. Really horrible human being is Jesus. Quintana, I think the character was called.
Yes. But that creep can roll. And there's a new film by one of our favourite directors on this show, Hirokazu Koreeda. This is, I think I'm right in saying, his first outside Japan.
Is this the one with Ethan Hawke, if I remember?
Yeah, Ethan Hawke, Juliette Binoche and Catherine Deneuve. It's called The Truth, and we're hoping Aidan can review this for us on the show next week.
I love Koreeda, but he's always been sort of like the modern Ozu, like he's very much observing the family system in Japan. It'd be really compelling what he puts out when you divorce him from that.
Yeah.
Intrigued.
Yeah, I'm going to keep an open mind about that because any new Koreeda is interesting to me.
Yes, indeed.
So at the moment, we think our film of the week is probably going to be Radioactive, but let's face it, who knows?
Yeah,
It's expanded because the next week, of course, was going to be the week that A Quiet Place 2 came out. And Radioactive, according to launchingfilms.com, has expanded from over 100 locations to over 300 locations. Wow. So someone is making hay out of this mess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's going to be people really disappointed that A Quiet Place 2 got delayed. It's like it's going to just be more quiet in a place.
I mean, I was heartbroken to read that the New Mutants got delayed. It's so out of character.
Say it ain't so. Delayed? How could they? Don't they know there's an audience clamouring for hot X-Men action?
It'll come out just in time for Anya Taylor-Joy to be officially too big to do any follow-ups to this, won't it?
Yeah, and I'm kind of suspecting that they're just going to fart it out on Disney Plus at one point.
Oh, God, yeah, they probably will. I'd forgotten about Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Hey-ho. Anyway, until next week with whatever the hell it is we're doing, that's been your lot from Cinema Galactica. I've been Graham.
And I have been Rob.
See you next week.